Y'all, Wizard101 just put out a last-minute test ROM change that could have crazy consequences. This is something that we need to talk about because this could affect every single part of the game. So basically, on Thursday, which I want to say is the second to last day of this entire test ROM, they put out this last-minute change and put it in the patch notes. And what they did was they removed the effect of all the new jewels that they're adding from affecting the stat maxes at level 170. And for anybody unfamiliar with what stat maxes, why they matter really, in PvP and PvE they're different, and in PvE it really determines how offensive of a build you can make, which is very important. And in PvP it affects balancing, right? How do matchups work? How much of a frustration is it to play one school versus another? Now, a change to the stat maxes was expected because they announced that the hat, robes, boots, and wands weren't coming out with this update. But I think when they said that, a lot of people just assumed, okay, so the hats, boots, robe, and wand, they're gonna add what, like 5 damage, 3 resist, 2 pierce? We're just gonna see that much of a reduction from the stat max. And considering that the jewels were the big story of this update, it didn't really matter that much. It wasn't gonna affect things. But in the same update, they also removed the effect of all the new circle jewels and all of the new jewels in general from stat maxes. So in advanced combat, right, for PvP and raids, these are the new stat maxes that you see. And if you're familiar with the stat maxes at 160, it's barely any different. We're talking the biggest change is 4 damage for Storm after getting a whole 10 level increase. For PvE, considering I was using 5 circle jewels that each gave me 10% damage to get to 280% damage, because they're removing the jewels from the stat max, I assume that means that the new max damage is like 230, which is barely any different than what we already have. It's kind of crazy because one of the things that I was really looking forward to this update was more damage for PvE and more offense in PvP, but it seems like they're going another direction. Now, is this good or bad? It's last minute for sure, but is it good or bad? That's a real question. I think it depends on what part of the game you're looking at. There's a problem that I highlighted in a previous video of mine, but right now there's an issue where Death can be a better Storm. And they're going to be adding new themes and new rings that all give universal damage. They're going to be adding circle jewels that can give storm damage for any school, up to 50 damage. And the max damage you can presumably get is 230, which isn't actually hard to hit when you have that many circle jewels. So what you're going to see is a situation where any school can hit 230 storm damage, but some schools, unlike Storm, come with way more HP and way more health. When they factored in the circle jewels that give damage into the stat max, it was actually pretty hard for every school to hit the 280 max damage and also retain a bunch of defensive stats. Most schools couldn't even hit it, and if they could hit it, most of them couldn't be as, like good at it as Storm. But with this new change, I literally think any school can be Storm, which is kind of nuts. I feel like it further reduces the school identity in PvE, and in PvP, it's a very, very interesting conversation. There are 2 outcomes, one that I think would greatly harm the game and one that could actually help a lot. One outcome is let's look at the meta pet right now, right? Let's look at the meta pet right now to see one outcome. The meta pet right now is probably Armor Breaker and Dealer, and then you have a bunch of resist talents, including wards to the schools that counter you. So for example, on a life, I'm pretty vulnerable against Death and Storm. This would be a meta pet. But what will become meta in PvP, if they barely change the stat maxes, but also add all of these sources of damage in these new circle jewels, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna give up my Armor Breaker, I'm gonna give up my Dealer, and replace it with both fire and myth ward. And the pierce and damage that I lose, all I have to do is take off my Armor Breaker and Clockwork Courser, replace one circle jewel with a pierce jewel, take off my Dealer and replace another circle jewel with a damage jewel, and now I'm at my stat maxes, give or take. And I also have a pet that gives me 4 ward. And considering shield pins also exist, you could see a situation in PvP where people use all of the extra offense that they're getting in the form of jewels without the raise of a stat max. They could just use that to literally, not just quad ward, but basically have extra resist to 6 schools. That would make resist schools literally stupid to fight, and it would make healing schools way too tanky. Now, the other alternative is that instead of giving up the damage and pierce on your pet, you might use the extra circle jewels to get extra stats in a new school, like an off school. For example, on a life, I might use the fact that Storm gives way more damage per pip and actually use more circle jewels for Storm Pierce and Storm damage instead of giving up my main school damage and my main school Pierce for extra resist. Now, while that could be really, really exciting, actually seeing, a give and take of stats for you to dual school, that's never going to happen if the alternative is 4 wards. 15 resist for 4 extra schools is always going to outweigh anything else they add into the game. If everything that I just said makes very little sense, in In PvE, every school can become Storm even easier than ever before, and in PvP, we're really going to be seeing metas where everyone's running around with like almost 90 universal res, minus one school. That's silly, and I really think they need to think about what people will do when they add changes like this, especially when they're last minute. They put out a tweet saying they're gonna, you know, hopefully go live with this update before the end of November, and the wording of this tweet makes me think that they're done patching test ROM, meaning test ROM's done, the feedback period is over, and whatever they have in test ROM is gonna go live. If I'm wrong in concluding that, then the wording of this tweet is ridiculous, and unfortunately it misled me. But even if I'm not wrong, I don't understand why they would make such a crazy change that could affect so many things positively or negatively with only 2 days left in test ROM, not even a full 2 days. I'm not saying this change is necessarily fully bad because the dual schooling element could be cool, but I feel like no one had the opportunity to give feedback on this before it basically is going to reach live. I think that's nuts for a change this big. I do think part of the reason why the offensive part of stat max is barely increased in this update is because, you know, you have hats, robes, boots, and wands that are going to increase damage when we do get them in like, what, a couple of months? And as far as removing the jewels and their effect from the stat maxes, there's a very strong argument against raising PvP damage by 40% every school. I was kind of flustered even thinking about that. But I feel like this is just going to be another PvP meta that could be full of cheesy ass things that they're not going to address for a long time. And PvE seems to be really pushing Storm away from being a good school more and more, and any school that's low HP or low resist. I'm going to be honest though, this isn't worth the overreaction. If you're like a casual player, for PvE anyways, this isn't like a doomed update or anything. I think it just exposes a part of the game that really should be addressed. And in PvP, the meta is already so defensive. A more defensive meta might not really change that much. I just think the fact that this is a possibility is annoying. It could just make a lot of games unwinnable. Even more games that are currently unwinnable. And I think that's a little stupid. I'm imagining life wizards running around with like literally almost 90 resist to 4 schools, and they can still heal with way more HP because the new square jewels give them so much HP. The thought of that kind of scares me, and I hate that we weren't given the time to give feedback on the possibilities of the change to the stat maxes that they added with 2 days left in test ROM. Kind of a rant of a video, I'll be honest. If all I did was let y'all know that this is something that exists, great. But I think the fallout of this could also be pretty bad. I really do. And I can't really see the one good scenario coming out of this where a bunch of people are going to dual school. I don't see that being meta because it's too complicated and it's way more simple just to set out your ass for everybody. Just my 2 cents on what I think could happen. Hopefully PvP isn't like fully destroyed by this, and hopefully PvE still retains some semblance of school identity. I guess we'll see, but those are my hot takes of the day on this last minute test ROM change. Let me know what you guys think of this specific change to the stat maxes while they're adding all these jewels. Do you guys think there's maybe some positive side to this that I'm missing? Why do you think they decided to remove the jewels from affecting the stat max? Do you guys think that would have created other balancing issues? Let me know in the comments. As always, there's never a real right answer to these things, just frustration. But I look forward to reading all y'all's opinions. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.